Welcome to episode number 14 of the Men and Community podcast. This week's episode is all about how we feel in our own bodies. Carlo shares how the way we look changes the way we're treated. Matt encourages you to feel good even when nobody is watching. And together we discuss the dangers of toxic positivity. Thank you for being part of our community.
What's up, everybody? This is episode 13 of the Men and Community podcast. As always, I'm Matt. This is Carlo. We're thrilled to be back with you for another episode today. This episode, we're going to have a conversation about something that recently I've had a challenge with, and it's really impacted me. And I suspect I'm not the only one.
No,
and so
probably not.
Just kind of share a story and then kind of have some conversations of some of the reflections and learning that I did as a result of kind of what happened to me over the last little while here, and see where the conversation goes from there.
Yeah, but you can't give it away yet because we have to keep them in suspense so we can do our card.
It's all about suspense. I hope that, the old saying, you pay for the whole seat, but you're only going to need the front 10% because you're going to be on the edge of it.
Do you think any of our viewer or listenership sit on the edges of their seats as they watch us? Because I don't think it's true.
I'd like to hope so.
You think so? I can think of a couple that will
Now sitting there biting their nails like, what are they going to say next?
It's so controversial. Anyways, cards.
Please.
All right, I'm going first. What restaurant has the worst food? So I feel we're pretty spoiled here in Calgary. We have some really good food. Even like snobby seafood people would agree that it's not as good as Vancouver, Eric. It's not as good as Vancouver, but it's still quite good. But I remember that my worst experience at a restaurant was at a McDonald's. Shocker, no surprise. But it was at this point in time where I think it was in Sylvan Lake on a family trip, and we stopped in to get food as we were leaving the town. And you took a bite of this burger or a bite of the salad or whatever, and the lettuce had gone rancid.
Oh.
So it ruined everything else, right?
Oh, no.
And their entire stockpile of lettuce had gone rancid. So we went and brought our food back and said, this tastes terrible. They remade it and it was just as bad. And it was a McDonald's, so you're not going to sit there and argue with the manager to give you your money back because it's like a 16-year-old kid that doesn't care, right? But it was just so bad that we couldn't finish the food.
Brutal.
Oh, yeah. And it's a McDonald's, fast food. You don't expect gourmet quality, but you expect your food to be edible.
Yeah.
So that was probably my worst experience at a restaurant.
Yikes. I'm having trouble thinking of a specific experience. I can think that the times that I've had the worst experiences in restaurants hasn't necessarily been because of the food, but it's rather been because of the service or long wait times or whatever else. But if we're talking specifically about food, the thing that's coming to mind for me, also like a big chain, is Boston Pizza. Now, let me preface this. I've always enjoyed going to Boston Pizza. What I don't enjoy, though, is the fact that Boston Pizza prices now are they think they're pricing themselves at the same level as, the
Moxie's,
more upscale chain restaurants. And inflation is what it is. The world is changing. Everything's getting more expensive. But for these restaurants or service providers that refuse to up the level of quality to somewhere justify the increased value proposition that they need to be charging, makes me very upset. And so I appreciate that you need to increase your prices for your businesses to be viable, but do something to actually earn it.
Well, and on that note, I stopped in at a fast food chain yesterday, craving something cold, and they had their new frozen soft beverage. And it was $4 for a small. And as I'm drinking this thing, I'm like, it's just a Slurpee that I could have stopped in at a 7-Eleven or a Max and got for $1.30.
Yeah.
For a big chunker like this, but this restaurant, bought these brand new machines. And I think what it comes down to is that a lot of these chains are starting to realize that their customer base is becoming dissatisfied with how expensive and how often they're raising their prices. So instead of raising the prices of the old things, they bring in these new, unimaginative, new things. And this goes for everything, not just the food industry, all of these new things that they can sell at a higher price point because it's new.
Yeah.
So yeah, inflation is one thing, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, is right.
Hill card.
All right. What's an experience you've had that not many people know about? Oh, interesting. What's an experience I've had that not many people know about?
Ooh, I've got mine.
I'm drawing a blank, so if you've got yours, go ahead.
Sure. I used to fairly regularly race cars. Now, this wasn't in a professional capacity, but it was me and my buddy Ryan, who I know listens to this podcast. Hi, Ryan. He and I would take my old Subaru down to Race City, which was a racing track we had here in Calgary that got closed down to turn it into a dump. But it stayed closed and vacant for years to the point that we could still use the parking lot. And that's what we did, is we used the parking lot as a makeshift rallycross course. So for those of you that don't know what rallycross is it's just kind of dirt, snow, and ice. And they lay down these cones in, tracks, and the cone direction, like if it's on its left, you go left. If it's on its right, you go right. And you would just follow this. And it was about how fast you could take the course. And, it wasn't that I was terribly good at it, but it was so much fun. And specific, I remember there was this one time we pulled up to the starting line waiting for our turn, and we were blasting the old Nyan Cat song. I'll post it in the Discord.
Sure.
Okay. But it's this really crazy internet song that's super upbeat. And we were had drank like 3 coffees that morning, and we were going, and we're just sitting there, and we roll down the window so the start guy can give us like, okay, you're going to be going in 30 seconds. And he looks at us, he goes, okay, just go. He was so done with us. But yeah, so that was my experience that I guess I don't talk a lot about anymore because I don't do it anymore.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. The one that's coming to mind for me, and I don't know, I don't know, I'm just at a loss now for all of the things. I know I mentioned it kind of in our intro episode when we were diving a little bit more into us, but just to dive a little deeper, I was in Scouts for a really long time, and through Scouting got to participate in some really, really cool outdoor pursuits. And a couple of the most notable ones that I'm really grateful to have gotten to do. One of them is hiking the West Coast Trail. And so for those of you that don't know, the West Coast Trail is a very, very famous hike. It's around, I believe it's around 80, 85 kilometers, something like that, along the coast of Vancouver Island, which is an island just off of the west coast of Vancouver, which is where the capital city of British Columbia, Victoria, is on Vancouver Island. Weird that Vancouver isn't on Vancouver Island, but whatever. It is what it is. So this hike, it can be done typically in between 5 to 7 days, usually what people do it. And I think that me and my group were on the trail for 8 days, and I think we hiked for 6 days.
Wow.
And took a couple of days just to enjoy the beachfront campgrounds and things of this nature. So that was a really cool trip. And I've also done some really cool multi-day canoeing trips as well. So, I often forget or downplay the really cool outdoor experiences that I've had. And so it's led me to feel more confident and proficient. And for example, when we got to go whitewater rafting in Costa Rica, and, having some of those experiences on whitewater, or hiking at a relatively high level, these sorts of things are things I don't think I talk about that often.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Very cool.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So I was going to say, as we launch into this episode, this is a little bit of a change of pace, because it's like I have a fair amount of episodes, I think, in the past where I'm talking about something I've experienced and I'm struggling with. And now it's your turn. So you have a story to share with us about a recent trip you had to Vancouver.
Yeah. So one of the things that I get to do as one of my numerous hobby, side hustle, other jobs, moonlighting,
living that millennial life.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing a billion things and still not making enough money. I work with a company called Jay-Z Entertainment that specializes in DJ motivation and dancing services that are hired to hype up events. We're talking weddings, high school grads, and we actually specialize in mitzvahs, bar and bat mitzvahs. And so I was hired to come out to Vancouver for the week to provide services for 4 different events over the course of the week, which I love it. So excited. And thankfully, I'm really grateful that my work is flexible enough that I'm able to do my work full time there. And then in the evenings, I would go and do these events. Well, the day before I was scheduled to leave, I started noticing that this spot on my face was starting to swell up a little bit. And it felt kind of like a classic zits, like classic breakout sort of thing. And so as you do, you kind of inspect, poke it a little bit. Can I pop this? Cool. So I try to pop the zit. This is not going to be, those of you watching on YouTube, don't worry. This is not one of those like zit popping videos that's all over YouTube. Weird thing that people are into. So I tried to pop the zit, popped it, and then it started swelling. And by the time I went to bed that night, there was the swelling had gone kind of from the bridge of my nose all the way down to my upper lip on the one side of my face. It was very painful, uncomfortable, not super noticeable to the, to the casual observer, unless I smiled and you could tell that one side of my lip wasn't moving very well. And I just, it made me automatically just dread the next couple of days that I was supposed to be spending the evenings, on a stage, on a microphone in front of hundreds of people, emceeing, motivating, hyping up events. And this is something that I was really, really worried about. And so sure enough, get up the next morning, the swelling hasn't gone down, much to my dismay. I get on the plane, go to Vancouver, and the pain's worse. The swelling's starting to get worse too. And the swelling continued to progress over the next several days to the point where my face was swollen from right underneath my eye all the way to my chin. So my jawline on the one side of my face was actually quite a bit more swollen, and all radiating around this one spot just above my lip. And it was just an awful feeling. Like, obviously it was painful. So there was that. So I was like trying to manage the pain, but also trying to manage the swelling. But like the worst part by far was this anxiety around going out on stage and presenting myself in front of these groups of hundreds of people that I didn't know, haven't met. And, I pride myself in being able to be confident and comfortable on a microphone for groups. And I know that my skills of being on a microphone and being comfortable talking and public speaking and all these things come from, it's a cognitive thing, right? It's my ability to either deliver information or to adapt on the fly or to speak confidently and comfortably to a group of people. Realistically, none of that has any bearing on my physical appearance. And yet all of this anxiety that I was feeling was based on the fact that I was not feeling comfortable with my physical appearance. Spent a lot of time thinking, do I wear a face mask to cover it up? If I wear a face mask, do people worry that I'm sick and coming to MC their events with COVID? Like, all these things that went through my mind, I just didn't know how to process it. And it led to a huge amount of anxiety where I was questioning how much of my perceived worth in what I do is based on my ability to present myself physically.
So my first question, I guess, would be for you is, do you feel like your performance, your ability to deliver what you would normally be able to deliver, do you think it was diminished or at a lower level than normal because you were struggling with this at the time?
I don't think so. It's hard for me to judge that because the other folks that I was working with, so we always work in like MC DJ tandems. I was working with brand new DJs, So those weren't people that I was familiar with that could give me that feedback of like, hey, you're not quite on your game compared to normal things. But I don't think so. I think that once I got up there, once the adrenaline was flowing, I think I was delivering the kind of experience that I would have normally delivered. Um, but it's hard for me to say, right? Like, could I have found another gear, another level,
Sure.
had that not been the case? And so, no, I don't think that it affected my performance, but I also know that being in my head so much about it that maybe it did. Like, it's hard to know for sure.
Yeah. Well, and this really isn't a new concept. It's not something that is specific to men. Of course, human beings, we all, for the most part, pride ourselves and put a lot of stock in our physical appearance. And there's study after study after study that talks about, people that are more conventionally attractive, having easier paths in careers, making more money, doing this, doing that, right? There's a reason that celebrities and models have high status values in the world that we live in. So, as always, if we take the more specific to men approach when we're talking about these things, because that's the frame of reference we bring to the table here, we pride ourselves so very much on the way people view us. And that can be viewed in terms of the attractiveness scale. It can be viewed, I think, more importantly, in the more put together kind of scale. And I think the easiest way to describe this is a man that wears a suit and a man that doesn't wear a suit. And if you haven't had the experience of wearing a suit as a man, like a nice, well-tailored suit, honestly, it's life-changing. And I think you would agree with me because both you and I love wearing suits. But it changes so much. One, people treat you different. And it's kind of crazy. People treat you so massively different when you're in a suit because their initial appraised worth of you is higher. This guy has a nice suit. He's well dressed. He's put together. He must be important. He must do, all these different things. So they treat you different. And more importantly, you feel so very different, right? You feel almost like you could take on the world. And I'd imagine this is a very similar feeling for women that, are wearing their favorite outfit or something along those lines, right? Where you just feel more powerful, you feel more capable. So when that is taken away from you in a scenario that is outside of your control, such as, this thing that pops up on your face or acne or whatever it is, it's a really hard thing to come to terms with because now you don't have the choice. Oh, I'm just going to put on a new suit. I'm just going to get my hair done. Like, you don't have that choice anymore because you're waiting for your body to do what it does and heal and all that kind of stuff. So I can totally empathize with where you're coming from. And I think props have to be given to you for pushing through that and still trying to maintain the quality of performance that you would normally give, because I do know many people that would let them affect them. And, they would have some misgivings, and we've all seen it. It's like the stain on your shirt analogy, right? You get a stain on your shirt, and the first thing you want to do to tell people, when you walk into that meeting is, sorry about the stain on my shirt. I had a little bit of an accident at lunch, just to get it out of the way. So you're not wondering whether they're going, why does he have a stain on his shirt? But the reality of it is that most people will never even notice you had the stain on your shirt because you're busy doing what you're supposed to be doing.
And it's interesting you say that. So I made a point of not mentioning it.
Yeah.
So I arrived in Vancouver on a Thursday morning. I had a gig Thursday evening, Friday evening, Saturday evening. All 3 of those days, the swelling got progressively worse. Over those 3 days, the only person that I acknowledged it with was the DJ that I was working with on the Saturday night. He was also the DJ I worked with on the Friday night. Shout out to Big Blizz. And so he, was the one who was best positioned to see the difference. And so I wanted to acknowledge it with him. But he was the only one. And so part of it for me was that exact thing. I didn't want to draw attention to the thing that maybe no one else would necessarily have noticed. I don't want to be presumptuous enough to think that anyone necessarily would be staring at me long enough to be like, oh, one side of his face is bigger than the other. Right. And so I certainly didn't want, these events, even when I'm on the microphone, these events are not about me. So drawing attention to these things didn't seem worthwhile. Also there's that fear, as you say, of if you draw attention to it, then that's the only thing people will notice.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think the reason that we put so much weight on our physical appearance is due to the fact that we feel people treat us differently with that. Would you agree or disagree?
Very much agree. And one of the reflection pieces that I've actually had, which is interesting, is like, I don't remember the extent to which I got into this in our kind of like get to know us episode 2 or 3 or whatever.
I think it was 3.
I had a pretty massive like glow up when I was in my adolescence. So 12 years old, I'm about, I don't know, 5'8", 5'7", always a relatively tall kid, 5'7", 5'8", and like at my heaviest, I got to like 190 pounds in 7th grade. I was a big dude. And in between the summer of grade 7 and grade 8, I changed from a charter school, which is essentially a private school, to a public school. But I also started playing football and I had a growth spurt. So all of a sudden I was like 5'11", 6 feet tall-ish. And I had lost a bunch of weight. So I was down to like 160.
Mm-hmm.
So, basically like stretched myself out. And it was really, really bizarre change and dynamic, because the other major thing that happened entering this new public school was when I was introduced to social dancing, which, as everyone kind of knows, that's been following the podcast, dance is a really significant part of my life.
Yeah.
And to see for the first time, to go from someone who is like the fat, really kind of classically nerdy, math loving kid in a charter school, to being, relatively athletic, and a good dancer, and to have like all these other, these people, my peers, like literally fighting each other to dance with me, was like this weird shift in frame of reference that, like, to your point, I think even accentuated even further this feeling to me of like wanting to always look my best and put my best foot forward. And it like goes to what you were saying about being in a suit, just like doing everything that I can to look my best, to be able to elicit the best first impressions that I can.
So I feel like I have a unique frame of reference to give here, and I'll explain why. You mentioned the concept of a glow up, right? Now, we all know someone who's had a glow up, or maybe you were the person that had a glow up, and it's an amazing feeling to be on the other side of that, right? You feel pretty great about that glow up, and you feel like you've settled into yourself and your confidence level goes up and all that kind of stuff. So for me, I've had 3 glow ups. Okay.
Must be nice.
But it wasn't like glow up, glow up, glow up, like where you're progressively getting better, right? So I was always a large kid. So when you said you were 190 pounds at 7th grade, right? That's what you said. I giggled to myself a little, because like that was just my weight. That wasn't me on the upper scale. That was just my weight. I was a big kid. So when I was 17, 18, I lost like 40 to 60 pounds. I went from being the biggest O lineman to the smallest O lineman in high school football. Then following high school, I gained it all back, went back up to about 280. Lost it all again, went back down to about 220. Then I went all the way up to like 315. And now I'm sitting at about 230, 240. So I've done this back and forth. And it's kind of heartbreaking to see how differently people will treat you based off of how you look, right? And in the most recent example, where I am now, the friendships I've formed, the professional opportunities that have been awarded to me, my income, the opportunities in life that I have, all substantially better than they were 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when I was 315 pounds, right? Not only that, but you treat yourself better. And this is where my frame of reference comes from.
Okay.
After the second time this happened, I realized that that was the most unhealthy part of living in a body that you weren't happy with. It was not the way the other people treated you, but the way you treated yourself. So I started looking for the little moments of a glimpse of who I wanted to be in the body of who I didn't want to be, right? So one of the ways I like to explain this is that when I looked in the mirror, I saw a different person than who I actually was. I saw who I wanted to be, just kind of overshadowed by who I was. So there would be times where I'd put on a nice suit. There'd be times where maybe I'd lost a little weight. There'd be times where I had gotten a compliment. There was times where those moments allowed the inner confidence that I had, that I knew was like the true essential Carlo, to come out, even though I didn't externally represent that yet. And I think what's kind of important for people that are put in a situation where either it's temporary, right, such as what you're talking about, or it's permanent in the fashion of, you know, something particular about your appearance or your body or the way you hold yourself that you don't like, that maybe you don't have in your control, that really the only opinion that matters is your own. You don't really need anybody else to tell you or treat you differently because of the way you look, because the confidence of that suit comes out if you believe you look good in the suit, right? So is life a little bit easier now that I have lost a whole bunch of weight and have hit the gym and, in my opinion, you look better? Yes, wholeheartedly. Yes, I will never go back. But it was because I clung to that vision of the internal self so hard that as I was going through this transformation to make my way there, it was like coming home. It wasn't a surprise. It was me settling into who I truly wanted to be. And it didn't matter what anybody else said to me, because you will not believe the amount of people that will criticize you for trying to become more healthy, for trying to improve your appearance, right? I remember one woman that I absolutely adore came to me and she said, "Carlo, you're losing so much weight so quickly. Do we need to be concerned about you? Are you eating?" And I had to legitimately say, like, yeah, don't worry, I'm eating. I'm just on this path now, right? And if you've ever been on a diet during like a long weekend, you go over to a friend's house for a barbecue and there's like, you know, all the chips and all the things, and they look at your plate and like, what do you mean you're only having a piece of steak? What do you mean you're only having one burger? Go eat, especially when you're from an Italian family, right? You'll never believe the criticism you get when you're trying to become more healthy. So I think the point of that in my frame of reference is it doesn't matter how happy or unhappy you are with your looks. It's because you're clinging to the external validation of it that you're worried about it.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And maybe too, you're worried about external validation or okay, so let me back up. So I experienced this. I was pretty sure it was temporary. Thankfully, my face, for those of you who aren't watching on YouTube, is more or less
It's returned to its handsome self.
back to back to its weirdly okay self. Anyway,
So humble.
neither here nor there. I had a weird analogy about my face when it was swollen that was talking about some former prime minister of Canada, and it's probably less than appropriate. Anyway, so now that it's back, I kind of had this reflection too of what would happen if that was permanent. Obviously something that's presumably out of my control, and how that would have felt if that was a thing. And so your comment about internal versus external validation is a really interesting thing. I recognize that not all people are going to be in careers or doing work like mine where, to some degree your success is based on external validation. Like when I'm at a party, I'm on the microphone.
Yes.
My level of success is directly a result of how well the people there respond to me. So there is that two-way feedback of if I'm not doing my job or people aren't responding to me, I know. But then I have to take a step back and say, okay, why is it that people are or aren't responding to me in that situation? Is it because of my appearance or is it because of my abilities? And those can be kind of hard things to parse out sometimes. And so to your point, I think it's really, really understanding what it is about yourself that makes you successful and to what degree your physical appearance plays into that. And how can you give yourself the best amount of tools to make yourself feel good.
And I think that's really important. And I remember I had a friend who just felt he was unattractive to women. That was his thing. He's like, no girl will ever want me. I'm not good looking enough for anybody. And I remember having a conversation with him going, so if that's the case, if that's how you truly feel, stop living your life trying to make yourself quote unquote more attractive. Live your life making yourself the kind of person you want to be. Right? And that person for him included things like, being well dressed and going to the gym and playing soccer and doing a lot of these kind of things and developing skills. And he got himself caught up in, I don't know if he took my advice or realized that was the direction he wanted to go, but he started doing all of these things. He almost forgot about, how he felt about not having someone in his life. And sure enough, a year later, he called me and he's like, I met the most wonderful girl and, we have all these same interests and it's amazing. And so it was almost like once he stopped being so concerned about the way he looked on the outside and again just gave himself the abilities and the skills to live the life he wanted to, that his, I guess, attraction level went up or he felt better about himself, right? So, I think as human beings, we all put so much weight on what we think other people want to see from us. And because of that, we completely neglect what we want to see from ourselves. Right? And that is arguably so much more important. Right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you value somebody else's opinion. If they are happy with you, but you're not happy with yourself, you're not going to be in a good spot.
And this becomes a really fascinating chicken egg argument, right? Because, one of the incredible paradoxes about the human experience is that we are all individual and we're unique. We think for ourselves, and yet every single human in some way is going to be reliant on a community. You're reliant on other people, whether it's for growing and harvesting your food or providing the services in wherever city or community you live in, right? So we're these deeply individualistic people that pride ourselves in our uniqueness and our diversities, and yet we are so reliant on other people for success. So which is it? Do we try to really lean into our individuality at the expense of alienating the communities to which we rely on in other sorts of ways? Or do we Like, what is that happy balance that we strike between being the best version of ourselves, to which we feel good intrinsically, we feel like we're putting the best version of ourselves forward, but one that is acceptable to the society or the community that on some level has to accept us because we rely on them to provide us services for our life to exist.
I'm giggling to myself because the point I want to make now relies on one of the rules of the internet.
Uh-oh. The internet has rules?
The internet has rules.
I don't think that's true.
No, it does. Okay, I'm not going to explain rule number 34. You can look it up.
There's 34 rules of the
There's
internet?
more than the 34. But rule number 34 of the internet, I'm not going to explain it, but in essence is that it exists. Okay? So the point I'm trying to make here is this, is that if you were to just say, I am going to embrace my individuality, throw out the requirements of acceptance from anybody else other than myself, I guarantee you there is a subset of society that exists, values, and accepts you as a person as you have now chosen to become. If you choose, hey, I am going to accept myself in this way because I don't care what anybody else thinks, all you are saying is that I am throwing the general rules of what society accepts out the window. That does not mean there is not a subset of society that will appreciate you for everything that you are.
Mm.
And I think that's the true root of what we struggle with, especially in today's social media age, is that we see this picture that has been painted for us from social media and big media and Hollywood of what normal looks like, what normal acts like. But that does not mean that normal for someone else isn't very different from that image that has been painted for us. So if you feel more comfortable in your skin looking and acting a certain way, that does not mean you will be alone without community. It just means you're looking for a different kind of community.
That's an interesting perspective. I like it. It's just, it almost feels like it's skirting the issue of trying to make that distinction between conformity versus individuality.
I can understand why you say skirting, because it's almost like I don't even want to try to conform. I'm just going to be me and say, screw it to the rest of the world. But I feel like there's almost a little bit of power in that. I think really the world clings to people that are confident in their own skin.
Yeah.
Right? There's no actor or actress that you look at that doesn't have a semblance of confidence. Right? Like, even look at somebody who, in my personal feelings, this is no attack at him, but Pete Davidson, right? I think Davidson is his last name, right?
Yeah.
Super awkward guy. I can barely watch anything he's in. But he has been accepted by media and by regular society as being funny and genuine, and lots of people love him as an actor. But he does not fit your traditional scope of what an actor is like.
True.
And he just basically said, this is me. I'm going to be me. I'm going to act and do the things that I want to do. And look where it got him. Because he's confident in who he is.
Yeah. And that's a good point. You know, so many people try to force conformity and then they end up being unhappy because they're not willing to be who they hoped they would be. You know, the classic story of like, I wanted to play the saxophone. I wanted to be a saxophone player, and now I'm an accountant.
Yeah.
Right. You know,
They're always accountants.
You think the world's going to dictate the things that you need to do. And then they don't necessarily live into the dreams that they have for themselves. I'm trying to relate this back, and it's trying to circle back now to what I experienced,
Sure.
and this ultimately when I showed up at each event, I love what I get to do so much that once I got there and once I started doing my thing, I completely forgot that
Mm-hmm.
my that I wasn't looking the way that I wanted. Everything else kind of fell by the wayside. I was doing what I loved, and the rest of it didn't matter. And interestingly, at the end of each of those events, my face was less swollen than when I started. Now, there's probably a realistic explanation.
Medical
I was
reason.
moving more, so there was more blood flow to other parts of my body as I was moving and dancing, and so the swelling of my face is going to go down, whether or not that's viable or what. But
Mm-hmm.
I just think that there's something to be said for, at the end of the day, all of the anxieties that I felt about going and doing this thing for hundreds of people were effectively washed away when I actually started doing the thing that I love to do. And I think that there's real power in that too. And I think it speaks to what you're saying of, finding the places where you feel like you get to be the best version of yourself, where you feel like you're accepted. And when you're in that power zone, or that place where you get to do the things that you love, that you're going to naturally be accepted. And very rarely is your physical appearance going to actually matter, so long as you're able to feel good about the way that you're able to put yourself forward.
And I think a really great example of this, as I've mentioned before, is that I'm a pretty big gamer. I don't play a lot of, like, I don't, I'm not committing 10, 15 hours a day to playing video games, but when I have an opportunity to sit down and play, I play. And when you form community with video gamers in specific, you have to understand that what you see of that person is their in-game avatar. You do not see that person's face, their body, the way they look, the way they hold themselves. You see, and your experience of them is their voice and the way they act. So it's amazing to get to know people for everything other than their appearance, right? And interestingly enough, when we launched our Discord server, I changed my profile picture in Discord to an actual picture of myself. And that changed it across all the servers I'm in, including one for like a clan that I'm in. And I had a couple guys comment to me. One of them, basically the whole comment was, it's very interesting to know what you look like now. And it makes a lot of sense.
Interesting.
Yeah. You look like you act, or vice versa. And I think that's really, really cool to know that these people got to know me based off of everything other than my appearance. But going back to that idea of me living the life that I once saw as only my internal self, that was the nail that drove it home, saying, you're now living and acting what you always thought you should be. Because now this person learned all those things about me from everything other than my appearance, and now your appearance just matches that.
And I think that is what everybody should aspire to, is aspire for, and I want to be careful how I say this, because there's an underlying point that I want to make here. I think everyone should aspire to have their to be able to show up in a way that matches how they act when they feel like nobody is watching. And I think that if those two things can reconcile, that's really cool and that's really exciting. Earlier, when you were talking about some of your experiences around the changes in weight that you've experienced through your different relationships with, whether it be food or fitness, It got me thinking a lot about body positivity, which is something that's talked a lot about. And there's so much rhetoric right now talking about how people that are intensely invested in fitness are somehow fat phobic. And this is somehow going after and against the idea of body positivity. Where I want to draw, for me, where I draw a line in the sand, which I think is very, very important, is body positivity is crucial. It is so important that everyone has the opportunity to feel good in the skin that they're in. This is everything that we've been talking today, that everyone feels confident in the way that they can show up in the world, however they choose to show up in the world. But I think there's a second half to this, which is where I think the body positivity argument falls short. And it is that body positivity is crucial and should be supported so long as that person is willing to accept the consequences that go along with the lifestyles that they're choosing to participate in that lead to their level of confidence and positivity about their own body. I speak a lot in the other content that I generate about toxic positivity, and it's that, people like to refute positivity as being naive and as ignoring and avoiding what is truly happening around it. And that is true. Toxic positivity is essentially believing that everything is good and putting on rose-colored glasses and choosing to ignore everything that's bad. And I think that the body positivity argument that's being made in the rhetoric and some of the ways that fitness is being accused of being fat phobic, body positivity is now transcending to this level where it is, in some cases, a form of toxic positivity because we are choosing to accept and be loving towards ourselves and choosing to naively or maybe ignorantly avoid the consequences of what some of those choices that we're making in the interest of body positivity are. And I think that so long as everybody is willing to accept the consequences of whatever choice they're making in terms of how they present themselves physically, then their choices toward body positivity should be applauded. And that's just a kind of a caveat that I want to put on this whole conversation for me, because we can't choose to live ourselves in a place where we feel confident and good about our own bodies and unwilling to accept the consequences of whatever choices might happen as a result of those choices.
And I think that's a really good point, because the way I look at positivity is as a catalyst. So let me explain. You chose, as you got up on stage this week, to ignore some of the misgivings you had about what was going on. You chose to put on a positive face, a positive attitude, and deliver everything that you could in as great a way as possible so that this event went well. That positivity launched you into having a good night. Where you feel you still delivered good things, and where at the end of it, you even felt like what was going on with your face was less pronounced.
For sure.
When you have somebody who chooses to look at themselves, and if we're going to stick on the body positivity idea, in a positive light, that makes every other decision surrounding that also more positive. So an example would be, is if I stared in that mirror when I weighed, over 300 pounds and I just berated myself. All that would do is make me feel poor. And for some people, including myself, would lead me to more unhealthy eating habits as a coping mechanism, which is something that happens to many, many people that struggle with being overweight and eating disorders. But because I chose to say, in the mirror, I see who I truly want to be. This is just who I am right now. And I'm doing everything I can to get closer to that person every day. It led me to start going to the gym. It led me to start eating better. It led me to start learning more about nutrition and fitness and health and mobility and all of those things. I didn't beat myself up. I looked at it as a positive light. And I've seen this over and over again from people that are struggling with things. When they chose a small amount of positivity, it made things better, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but it always made a difference for them. So to me, positivity is a catalyst. And whenever you are struggling with any sort of issue, whether it be appearance-based, perception-based, mental health, physical health, relationship, whatever, if you choose to take the direction of positivity in even the smallest of forms, it will never hurt you. I think that would be my big takeaway from this discussion is that you have a choice. You have a choice. You had a choice to cancel the event, fly home, sit in your hotel room, whatever it was. You had that choice. Would it have hurt you, be detrimental to your career? For sure, to cancel an event last minute. But you chose to be as positive as you could, follow through with your commitments. And you came out, I hope, learning a lesson from it, right? It didn't hurt you being positive.
Yeah. I definitely, the big takeaway for me is that, even when I'm struggling, I'm still going to feel my best mentally when I'm going out and doing the things that I love, even if there's some part of me that feels like I'm not putting my best foot forward. Now, as we said earlier, I don't feel like my performance suffered at all, but it certainly was something that was in the back of my head until I got so much into the flow of what I'm doing that it didn't matter. So I guess my big takeaways from this conversation is put yourself in a position to feel good about yourself. And if the version of you that you see in the mirror is different than the version of you that you aspire to be, not to be so hard or critical of yourself, but instead think about what that pathway is and those decisions, choices, action steps that you can take to get yourself there, and appreciate that the journey is getting to where you need to be, and continuing to put yourself in a position to do the things that you love with the people that you care about, for the people that you care about, and just lean into those things that allow you to feel optimistic, that allow you to feel positive, surround yourself with those people and do those things. I was very, very grateful that what I experienced basically lasted a week, essentially.
Yeah.
In the whole scheme of things, not an issue. I'm still very, very lucky. I feel very, very privileged that I get to have this conversation and talk about something that affected me, but it only affected me for a week. Like, what? Like, that's nothing. But there are challenges that continue to affect people for much longer, whether they choose them or they don't choose them, whether they have the ability to get out of them or not. But there's always other choices that we can make to make ourselves, help ourselves feel more positive, more optimistic about ourselves.
Yeah. And you know what? There's also going to be those people that look in the mirror that don't conform to what, society's standards of beauty or acting are, or whatever it is. And they're going to look in the mirror and they're going to be like, I am 100% happy with who I am.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Don't ever let anybody tell you different. That is true body positivity. When you do not conform to standard conventional beauty or standard conventional actions or whatever, and you are 100% you, good for you. That is an enviable position.
And I think that's the mic drop moment we need to bring things home on.
Perfect. Well, I think this turned into a really cool episode. I think I'm going to go into my gratitude, and it is one that you've shared with me, and I get to turn it back on you. Thank you for being vulnerable today, because there are moments of vulnerability that allow us to grow. And you and I have talked about this so many times about trying to make an impact in our community. And I feel that the best way to do that is by sharing those vulnerabilities, because sometimes people need to hear that even the person on the mic, on the screen, is just a normal person struggling as well. So thank you for your vulnerability, for being open to talk through this with me, and thank you for having the courage to get up, even not feeling your best, and still try and make those nights for those kids as best as they could.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm feeling really grateful for you. When you arrived for us to record today, my brain was in a million different places, and I felt like my brain was managing, filing, compartmentalizing everything well. But you were just such a grounding influence for me today, and just in like 10 minutes of conversation, just to talk through some things, debrief some things, make some plans. I just felt way more calm, and I just felt like my neck get longer as my shoulders relaxed. And so thank you for being that grounding influence for me.
You're welcome. We do it for each other a lot of days. All right, folks, I want to thank you for coming to another episode of the Mac podcast. As always, it's a lot of fun. Matt and I, before we got on camera today, we're talking about some things coming up. We're super excited for them. You got many great episodes coming along. You're going to hear all about it. For the things that we talked about during today's episode, like the 9 Cat song, I'm going to post some pictures of myself so you guys can see the glow up that I was talking about. I'm kind of proud of it. I'm going to share it. It's going to
be, I'll send my like grade 7 to grade
I think you
photos.
should. It's going to be on our Discord, which you'll find all over our social media. We've started posting more about it. There's QR codes in some of our posts. There's links in our Instagram bio. Come join us on our Discord. Come chat. Come view the things we're talking about. We really want to drive home a community there, and I think that's probably the best way to do it. Other than that, other social media channels, Instagram, Facebook. We got a Facebook page now.
We're bringing it back to 2004.
Well, for some of our older audience, I think we'll gravitate.
Facebook is timeless. Don't make us an age thing.
Neither Zuckerberg. Come chat, like, share, all those fun things that podcasters normally say. And anything else?
No, be well, everyone. Looking forward to connecting with you on the Discord and our social media channels. Take care.
Bye, guys.